So the Trinity, New Mexico UFO crash of 1945 is making news again. National news this time, thanks to Nick Pope sitting down with Tucker Carlson for a recent interview. Jacques Vallée and Paolo, I can't say her name, Harris, made a really great book about it. And that just came out as well. So Trinity has been making the rounds recently. I was surprised that it wasn't Jacques that or Paula that was on Tucker instead of Nick. I think that they are the experts on that as opposed to Nick Pope. But it's always good to see Tucker Carlson spreading the word about UFOs and getting this information out there, since he is like the biggest, news, opinion anchor out there. Love him or hate him, he has been on this story since the beginning. But let's get into it. This is Jack with Cosmic Road. I talk about UFOs and the paranormal. Please hit like, please subscribe, please share this video on social media, and please comment below as I'm going through the story. Also consider supporting Cosmic Road and the work I'm doing here by becoming a channel member. See the first line in the description below, or simply leaving a tip in the tip jar with the super thanks feature. Okay, moving on. I've been following Nick Pope for a long time and really appreciate his contributions to the discussion. He was the Fox Mulder of the UK. He was, sitting the weird desk or whatever they call it at the Ministry of Defense for a few years. And so he has some really intriguing insights. I don't know if he has studied the Trinity crash very well. And indeed, it's entirely possible that they're not even talking about the Trinity crash. I don't think they name it, but maybe I just missed that. But they are talking about the Trinity crash. Happened a couple of years before Roswell, right about the same time as the first nuclear testing. I'm a Texan. What are you going to do? I can't say the word. Okay. All right, but here is that discussion, and then I will have my thoughts on it. Nuclear. I knew I could do it. Okay, all right.
So history has recorded the first big UFO sighting in the United States is 1947 in Roswell, New Mexico, very famously, right outside Roswell. But actually, there was, in some sense, a bigger and more significant event sighting 2 years before, also in New Mexico, at exactly the moment the U.S. government was detonating the first atomic weapon, shortly thereafter used in Japan. And witnesses on the ground saw some kind of object shaped like an avocado, they said, crash land. It was inspected by a lot of locals. There were beings inside, they said, and it was carted away by the U.S. government. Now, people don't want to be called crazy, so no one said too much about it for quite some years. But people within the U.S. government believe it's true, and they believe it so strongly that now, as of this week, the Defense Department's annual spending bill will require, as per Congress, the Pentagon to go back and investigate what really happened. Nick Pope is a former UK Ministry of Defense official who's followed this subject very closely. He joins us to assess. Nick, thanks so much for coming on. So this is a story that most, I think, Americans are not even aware of, but clearly people within the U.S. government believe it's real, or they wouldn't have attached this to a spending bill, correct?
Correct. Yes, this is being called the Roswell before Roswell. And you're right, people with some knowledge of these intelligence programs who've been briefing Congress about this made sure that this was put into the legislation. And it's one of many UFO provisions in the new defense bill. The DoD must provide Congress with a list of everything they've found out about this specific incident, but all other incidents and programs from January 1st, 1945 onwards, and anyone involved in these programs or with information about it will be released from their secrecy oaths and non-disclosure agreements, and they'll be able to testify to Congress about this.
So here we have the nuclear connection again. This was around the first detonation in human history of a nuclear device. Subsequent to that, you've had UFO sightings at nuclear missile bases, around nuclear-powered aircraft carriers, nuclear-powered submarines. There's clearly some nuclear, I mean, I don't pretend to understand, but nuclear has some connection to these sightings, no?
That seems to be the case. And again, Congress is demanding answers on this. We had the latest report from the Office of the Director of National Intelligence last week that highlighted the fact that there were several hundred more sightings being investigated, military sightings, than we'd heard of before. Talked about unusual flight characteristics and performance parameters of this. And yeah, we must get to the bottom of this UFO and nuclear connection.
Yeah. I mean, I would think, and it feels like we're getting closer. I hope. Nick Pope, thank you for your work on this. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Isn't that fascinating? So we've got it becoming mainstream news that there was a UFO crash before Roswell. Now, of course, I've talked about this numerous times, that there were multiple crashes before Roswell and multiple interactions with the beings before Roswell. But it's really exciting to see this becoming mainstream news. And what does all this have to do with nuclear energy and atomic weapons? It's an indisputable fact that the beings seem drawn to our nukes. Are they keeping tabs on our nukes? They are concerned about it. They do seem very concerned about the welfare of the planet. And indeed, they seem to condition abductees and contactees into becoming or being more environmentally sensitive. That is just a thing. You see that time and time again, just the contactees relating their experiences themselves. There's also the Edgar Mitchell Foundation, the astronaut Edgar Mitchell, who did a lot of, that foundation did a lot of research into contactees and experiencers. And they did find that people that were abducted a certain number of times were more likely to be more pro-environment and to be more environmentalist-y. New word, I just coined it. But is that why they're actually drawn to the nukes? Or is it because of their concern for the planet? Or is there some other reason? Are they drawing energy from it? Or are they concerned about the bleed through, the extra dimensional bleed through into other realities or other spheres, other dimensions? That's something that Linda Moulton Howe has put out there or popularized. Is this idea that the beings are very concerned that it is possible that these atomic weapons are causing disruptions in other dimensions, and they are very concerned about that. Just one more possibility. Of course, the nukes aren't their main reason for coming here, and that's the mistake that some people make, I believe, is that they're associating UFO activity and alien activity with nuclear testing and weapons and energy. And they think that that is when it all started, and that's how it began, was our use of nukes. Well, as I've covered on the channel many times, all of this stuff was going on long before we had nukes. Now, just look at the stuff that we can verify, because there's a lot of stuff that we can't verify. But as far as verifiable information goes, our best case so far is probably the Mussolini UFO that Lou Elizondo himself has said was a real thing and really happened. And that crash occurred in 1933, I believe. And it came into the possession of the dictator Mussolini, and he got people to study it, including the scientist Marconi. Some of that material came into the Marconi company, possibly, and that may or may not have something to do with the deaths associated among the Marconi scientists in the 90s. But at any rate, that ship, or some part of it, came into the U.S. possession at the end of the war in 1945. So when they're talking about the date 1945 and how Arrow is supposed to be looking into cases going back to January 1st of 1945, they're associating it with Trinity. And that could very well be, the association. And what they were going for is looking for the historical records going back to Trinity. But they could also be looking for the Mussolini UFO, because we did get it in 1945. And if that's the case, if they are able to examine that evidence or that case, that could lead them all the way back into the 1930s, which could open even more cans of worms. Bring it on, guys. Bring on those worms. I want some wormy goodness. Anyway, the Trinity case is a fascinating case. Jacques Vallée has been talking a lot about it recently. I mean, it was interesting enough to motivate the likes of Jacques Vallée to write about it. And, you know, I really salute that because not enough people are covering UFO cases and incidents prior to Roswell. Many see that as the foundational moment with UFOs, and indeed it is foundational in the terms of ufology. Absolutely, it's ground zero for ufology. But it is not the earliest recorded UFO case. They seem to go back until the early 1900s, if not the late 1800s, and that's just in, you know, our quasi-modern era. But they, you know, the historical records of these things, in as much as, you know, we can put credence in them, goes back hundreds or thousands of years. The Romans and Greeks would call them flying shields because that is the reference they had. Many people associate various episodes of the Bible with alien encounters. There's ships in classic paintings. There's all sorts of stuff. You know, the Nuremberg UFOs. Anyway, these things have been around for quite a while. But at last, word is reaching out to the public that this stuff did happen at least before Roswell, and that is going mainstream now. So that is very exciting. And, you know, what do you think about all that? I'm really pumped about it. I think all this stuff is going mainstream in a really good way. Things are going really strong as far as more of a grassroots disclosure, and with some stuff leaking out from the government and government sources verifying and confirming some of this. They're not coming right out with the disclosure right out of the gate. I'm so far not very impressed by Sean Kirkpatrick, at least as far as talking to the public goes. There's probably a lot of activity behind the scenes, but as far as giving the public the truth, I am not impressed by Sean Kirkpatrick. But it's early days yet, so we'll see how that goes. Anyway, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you've enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up. I would really appreciate it. Please smash the subscribe button and hit the bell so you don't miss a single video. Please join me on social media. There's Facebook and Twitter links below. And please, if you enjoy these videos, please consider supporting the channel by becoming a channel member. See the first line in the description below, and there's 2 tiers of membership to receive exclusive access in videos. Until next time, this is Jack with Cosmic Road.